I didn't meet the stranger on a mountain or during some dramatic life crisis. I met him on an ordinary Tuesday, in a place I'd been 100 times before. What he said to me lasted less than a minute, but it rearranged how I saw myself forever. And the strange part is, I didn't even realize I needed that lesson until he gave it to me. At the time, my life looked fine from the outside. I was in my late 30s, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood in the Midwest. I had a stable job in operations management, a decent salary, and a routine so predictable it could have been written in advance. Every morning, I woke up at 6:15, showered, drank coffee that tasted more like habit than enjoyment, and drove the same route to work. Nothing was wrong exactly, but nothing felt right either. I had learned how to be useful, reliable, available. I answered emails immediately, stayed late without being asked, took on extra work because someone had to. I told myself that being needed meant being valuable, and for a long time, that belief kept me moving. But slowly, something else crept in. Exhaustion, not the kind sleep fixes, but the kind that settles into your thinking. A quiet resentment I never spoke out loud. A sense that my life was happening around me, not because of me. I remember standing in the bathroom at work one afternoon, staring at my reflection under fluorescent lights, thinking, is this it? Is this what it feels like to be an adult? I brushed it off like I always did. That's what I was good at, minimizing my own discomfort, turning self-doubt into productivity, turning emotional hunger into overachievement. Looking back, I realized I didn't lack confidence. I lacked self-worth. The week I met the stranger was one of those weeks where everything felt heavier than usual. My boss had praised my dedication, but passed me over for a leadership role again. He said I was dependable where I am. My relationship at the time felt distant, like we were roommates sharing obligations instead of partners sharing intention. Even my weekends were crowded with favors and errands that weren't really mine. On Friday evening, I stopped by a small, family-owned bookstore near my apartment. It was quiet, almost empty, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and time slowing down. I wandered without purpose until a thin paperback caught my eye. It was about personal boundaries, not in a flashy, motivational way, but quietly honest. I picked it up, flipped through a few pages, and felt something tighten in my chest. That's when I noticed him. The stranger was older, maybe late 60s. Gray hair, neatly trimmed beard, wearing a worn jacket like it had stories stitched into it. He stood near the counter, flipping through a stack of used books, unhurried. I didn't think much of him. We made brief eye contact. He nodded, I nodded. Nothing unusual, or so I thought. As I paid for the book, the cashier stepped away to answer a phone call. The stranger moved closer, setting his books down. He glanced at the title in my hand and smiled faintly. "That one changed my life," he said. I laughed politely. "Hopefully it helps me too." He looked at me, not intensely, not judgmentally, but with a kind of calm focus that felt rare. "You know," he said, "most people don't struggle because they don't work hard enough. They struggle because they don't believe they deserve better." I froze. Not because the words were loud or dramatic, but because they landed too accurately. He continued, casually, as if talking about the weather, "We confuse being needed with being worthy, but those are very different things." I felt exposed in a way that didn't feel invasive, just honest. Before I could respond, he added, "The hardest decision you'll ever make isn't changing your job or your relationship. It's deciding that your value doesn't come from how much you tolerate." The cashier returned. The moment should have ended there, but it didn't. I walked out of the bookstore with that book in my hand and his words echoing louder than anything I'd read in years. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before starting the engine. That night, I barely slept. The stranger didn't give me advice. He didn't tell me what to do, but he gave me a mirror. Over the next few days, his words followed me everywhere. How much you tolerate. Confusing being needed with being worthy. I started noticing things I trained myself not to see. how often I apologized when I hadn't done anything wrong, how I said yes before checking in with myself, how my calendar was full but my energy was empty. For the first time, I asked a dangerous question. What if the life I built was based on fear, not choice? That question led to another, and this one was unavoidable. What am I afraid will happen if I stop overgiving? The answer scared me. I was afraid of being replaceable, of being less liked, of being ordinary. I had built my identity on usefulness because it felt safer than self-respect. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. 2 weeks later, I faced a decision I'd been avoiding for years. My boss asked me to take on another major responsibility. No raise, no title change, just more weight added to the same shoulders. The old me would have agreed instantly. Instead, I asked for time to think. That alone felt like rebellion. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the book from the bookstore open in front of me. I realized something uncomfortable but freeing. I wasn't stuck. I was choosing familiarity over self-worth. The next morning, I declined the added responsibility unless it came with a role adjustment that reflected the workload. My hands shook as I said it. My voice didn't. The reaction wasn't explosive. There was no dramatic confrontation. Just a pause and a different look in my boss's eyes. A week later, the offer came back revised. Better terms, clearer boundaries. I walked out of that meeting feeling taller, not because I'd won something, but because I hadn't abandoned myself. That was the moment everything shifted. Self-worth isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It shows up quietly in the choices you make when no one is watching. I didn't suddenly become fearless. I didn't stop caring what people thought, but I stopped letting fear make my decisions. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's honest. That exhaustion is often a signal, not a weakness. That you can be kind without being invisible. The stranger never knew my name. I never saw him again, but he taught me something I'd been waiting my whole life to hear, without realizing it. Your worth is not measured by how much you endure. It's measured by how you treat yourself when you finally stop enduring. Sometimes the most important teachers don't stay long. They appear for a moment, say exactly what you need, and disappear. So here's the question I leave you with. If someone looked at your life today, would they see someone who knows their worth or someone still trying to earn it?